It's Monday, May 27th. I'm Adam Walsh, and this is The Signal. This world of ours is filled with flimsy appliances and devices that just get thrown out the first time they stop working. But what about repairing them? It's not that easy. Oftentimes, it's impossible. Today on the show, we're talking about the right to repair, what it means, what it can do for you and all of us. And this show is thanks to a listener email. The subject was right to repair. Here's what it said. Idea for show. Maybe you've done this one, but I'm so tired of throwing out things for want of a simple repair or a part that is no longer made for a particular model. Like the air purifier I've had for many years, but is now useless because I can no longer find the filters for it, and it won't run without filters in it. I've been washing and reusing the last pair of filters I had, but they just don't work anymore. So my only choice now seems to be a trip to the dump, and I can't even tell you how many toasters we've been through, and kettles. So, and the email says, imagine my chagrin when I passed this. And there's a picture attached. That picture was a large dumpster filled with refrigerators. A few of the ones on the top part of the refrigerator pile didn't look that old, right? They had like the ice dispenser and all that stuff. So the show suggestion was to do one on the right to repair. This is where we are. And folks, if you've got a show idea, email us thesignal@cbc.ca or call the Signal line and leave a message, 709-576-5260. And we will do our best to get the show on the air at some point. And by the way, the person who called me about farming, we're getting that show together, so give us some time. It's coming, I promise. When I was prepping for today's show, I found a couple of videos that the Competition Board of Canada has about right to repair, and they put things rather succinctly. So here's the first one that answers what is the right to repair.
Let's say you buy a product. Do you own it 100%? Can you do anything you want with it, like repair it yourself or find someone to do it for you? It depends. Sometimes you don't have a choice in how your product is repaired. Right to repair is a concept that aims to change that. It calls for consumers to be able to choose any repairer they wish, or even repair their own products. For this to happen, manufacturers would have to make parts, tools, and information available to both consumers and repairers. Take Mary, for instance. Her laptop isn't working. Without right to repair, she may need to take it here. But with right to repair, she can choose to go here, where it may be less expensive, here for higher quality, here because it's more convenient, or even tackle the repairs herself. With right to repair, Mary has the power of choice and can make competition work for her. Right to repair. Good for competition, good for consumers.
There you go. You learned about Mary's journey for a bit. Now, here's the question. Why does right to repair matter? Take a listen.
We generally think that people should have a right to repair things they own, or take them to a repairer they choose. But why is right to repair important? It's a bigger issue than most of us realize. The impacts echo across the economy, the environment, and the rights of consumers. When independent businesses can access the tools, information, and parts they need, they can compete for your business. Stronger competition in business equals stronger participation in the economy. If you have a product that doesn't quite work anymore, you can avoid having to replace it prematurely. Right to repair lets you extend the lifespan of things you own, preventing unnecessary waste in our environment and saving you money. Consumers deserve choice in how much they want to pay, quality of service, and convenience too. And for those who are rural, remote, or low income, this access and choice can make all the difference. The economy and consumers. Two big reasons why right to repair is really important.
And we have just one other little 30-second bit to play. Pike, you got it rolled up?
Before purchasing, find answers to these important questions. What's the useful life of this product? Are there restrictions on who can repair this for me? How available are the tools, information, parts, and service? Answers to these help make right to repair work for you.
All right, found that online. Figured I'd use it. This is The Signal. I'm Adam Walsh. It's a Right to Repair show. Joining me in the studio, we have Josh Leposki, Associate Professor in the Department of Geography at Memorial University. Also, Audrey Parnell, Board Member at the Tool Library, also Manager of Circular Economy at Econext, and you're doing a PhD.
Yes.
And what's your PhD in again?
Paleoclimate modeling.
So this is a future show.
Yes.
All right. Any thoughts on just that setup there, right? Anything missing? Anything you want to add to it from what we're hearing from, like, the Government of Canada clips there from the Competition Board, or anything else?
I'll jump in and say I think one of the important things that is sort of latent, not really said explicitly in that those clips you played, is the really important role that intellectual property law, IP law, has played in this very broad shift to decreasing repairability. That can get into some really detailed niggly wigglies, but the basic idea here is that the more and more of our everyday stuff that has a microchip in it, that means microchips run software. Software is a patentable, intellectual property protected thing, and without necessarily meaning to, I mean, intent here is really tricky to trace, but it has meant that manufacturers over time have gained a new way of imposing control over things that we buy, not just what we might typically think of as an electronic device, but like those fridges, for example.
Yeah.
And yeah, as I say, without necessarily an inherent intent, a form of control for manufacturers has been increasingly inserted into devices that in the past we would have purchased and been more or less protected by for sale kinds of doctrine under law. Yeah.
So this is one issue of it. Any other thoughts?
I think what's challenging, and what we also see at the Tool Library, similar to the email that you received, is there does come a point in time when manufacturers no longer supply parts. So this person can no longer use their air filter because there are no more filters or air purifier. And the same is true at the Tool Library. While we certainly do a number of appliance repair workshops, and we've had one in March at the AC Hunter Library, and there will be another upcoming in July, date still to be set with the library, where we'll do things like repair hair dryers and other kind of small electronics like kettles and air purifiers, irons. But there comes a point in time where we can no longer find parts. And so there is a real challenge with maintaining products, is manufacturing choosing to no longer support a particular line of product in the direction towards something newer, fancier, more sophisticated.
I was listening to a podcast, Josh, was the one you sent me, and they were talking about the fact that you get companies nowadays that are making things. So before, I mean, so the spare parts thing, also like the user's manual and like other things that would typically be included over the last 20 years, a lot of places that are making things are saying, well, actually, we're not even going to include these spare parts, or you're not going to be able to get them to begin with, and we're not going to send you a manual about how the inner workings of this thing works because we want you to buy another one, essentially, right? And this is where we've marched over the past 20 years. Because look, here's an example. I was out last year visiting my nan in Glovertown. And anyways, I won't get into all the details of the story, but there's a refrigerator in her basement. And Nan, correct me if I'm wrong on the year on this. Feel free to phone the show. But I believe it was it's still running well, and they bought it in like 1967, right? Like so, like just the lifespan. And then you look at like that picture that was sent to me of a dumpster full of things that are much newer than that. Just not like things don't last as long, and also we can't repair them. So like how, for whether it's like your seat with the Tool Library or Josh, what you do and what you've written extensively about, how does that make you feel about the like us at this time of climate change and caring about the environment, plus everything is so darn expensive right now? How do you feel as like consumers yourselves on this?
Yeah. I mean, The short answer is not good.
And that's the end of the show.
And
Thank you,
that's
everyone.
the show, yeah. But I think, I mean, there's a really important point I think here to make about how we live our lives as consumers and as citizens, and to think really carefully about how a lot of things that we take very, very much for granted are not the consequence of shopping our way there, but the consequence of organized consumer /citizen action. So, there's so many examples that are so mundane they don't even necessarily come to mind. But the fact that I can plug in an electrical appliance like a laptop or a hairdryer in this studio on the plug against the wall, and then travel to Vancouver and use the same thing without an adapter is in a way a minor miracle of collective action, right? That didn't happen by accident, and that didn't happen by companies voluntarily doing that. There was a whole history there of regulation and standardization, and that came, again, as I say, not through voluntary. We didn't shop our way there, and companies didn't volunteer to do it. We regulated it.
Yeah, because a lot of times companies won't be like, let's all work together, because that kind of might go against their bottom line. I mean, Apple and the dongle comes to mind with this, right?
Oh, yes, yeah.
So as a counter narrative to, for someone pushing against it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's when it comes to, things we think of as electronics in a more common sense kind of way, like a laptop. That's where those intellectual property things really come in, because even, the tiniest connections between different parts of a device, as soon as you can put a chip between those parts, you can mount software on that chip, and that makes it, regulated through IP law, not first sale doctrine or that kind of stuff. So it's a deliberate strategy for sure. In the U.S., it's also been found to be highly illegal. So,
okay, yeah. So there's also that. Audrey, why did you want to become involved with the tool library?
Sure. I found the tool library, number one, to be a great resource as someone who is not particularly handy myself, or doesn't also want to go and spend hundreds of dollars on tools that I might only use once, some of which could break just through sitting there and waiting. And so finding the tool library and going and checking tools out there myself. And then I was a part last year, we created the Zero Waste Festival, and that was really exciting to bring together a number of different sectors of St. John's with regards to zero waste. So thinking about kind of food waste and kind of having food composting and being mindful about using all reusable dishes at the event. We also had outfitters there, and that's another great source of information and place where you can get gear repaired versus having to go and buy a new tent. If your tent gets a patch or your tent starts leaking, they can patch it. If your tent poles bow, I had my tent poles bow in an extreme wind event when I was camping one time. And they can help you get all of that sorted out. They can help you resole your shoes, fix leaks in your shoes. And so all of that, very much trying to move away from single-use things fall apart. And I think it's unfortunately become kind of part of our culture, is this idea that once something becomes challenging for us to maintain or gives us a little bit of a headache, regardless of whether it's a refrigerator or a shoe, we discard it.
It's like, yeah, I'm done with that.
Yeah, we're done. And I think some of it is, we've lost a little bit of this resourcefulness through time as goods and services are easier to procure. And then conversely, right, I can very much see being a homeowner and you have a refrigerator that's not working and you can't get someone to come and fix your refrigerator for a month. Or the guy then comes and then says, it's going to take us another 3 weeks to get you a part. And you're like, I need a refrigerator. And so you go and you purchase a new refrigerator, and your old one then makes its way to the landfill, unfortunately. And so I think some of that is also, we've just lost having some of these people with the skills to repair things, and the sourcing of the parts, I think, is also really challenging, that people can just no longer repair things quite as quickly. And then things are made nowadays. I like to sew, and everyone always says if you can buy an old sewing machine with metal, like it's going to last you so much longer, right? So we've switched to making things with plastic parts, plastic breaks. Plastic also, however, is lighter, it's easier to ship, it reduces transportation costs, right? So all of these are big life cycle. It's not just one single small change. And then they all have chips in them now these days where they can do all sorts of fancy embroidery programs and things like that. But things have just become inherently made with parts that don't last as long and are harder to replace and harder to repair as well.
I was just going to add. I mean, I think the tool library and initiatives like it, they're really important pieces of community infrastructure that we really should have more of. And the point about the tools is really crucial too, because everything we make has environmental impacts, if you want. And I'm, as guilty of this as I suppose anyone who gets into it. I like to repair my own devices, but as someone pointed out to me, you bought a pack of tools there that you're probably going to use for maybe 12 minutes over your entire life. If you'd just taken that to the tool library or an entity like that, or a local business, that those people are using those tools for many times longer over the course of their useful life than just you as an individual. So these kinds of local community kinds of infrastructure are really crucial here. I think it's so important. Anything we can do to go beyond the almost automatic individual, what can I do, to something that is broader, I think is really important, because if you want to focus on the environmental elements of it, or savings of it, they're almost automatically more significant when you're, if you will, repairing together rather than by yourself.
Yeah, it's upsizing the impact.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
Speaking of impact and, moving into DIY for this part of the conversation, we've got Pierre Gehrig on the line, who's with the DIY, Do-It-Yourself Society of Western Newfoundland. How you doing?
Very good. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Loud enough and clear. Tell us about the society.
Well, basically, it's coming out of the whole DIY makerspace movement that do-it-yourselfish that had been with us forever, but really got kind of a kick in the 70s with the Whole Earth catalog. And then from there came the open software movement and the open hardware movement. And you started to notice in like the late 90s, early 2000s, this creation of what they call maker spaces, where people were pooling their resources into a space, getting together and doing stuff, like either repairing, working on their own projects, and so forth, and exchanging information. And what we have here in Western Newfoundland is that we get to meet once a week at the center. Basically, it's an extension of the university, but it is the Center for Research and Innovation, and they have a maker space there, and we get together and we work on our stuff and get to use their equipment.
Then, with what you're doing there with the DIY Society, what are your thoughts around just what we're talking about here today and the right to repair?
It's funny because after we had our conversation, I flashed back to two things. One is my father taking the tubes out of the radio, going to the local pharmacy to a tube tester machine, finding which one was deficient, buying it from at the pharmacy, going back and putting it back into the radio or TV. If you think about that in our current context, that sounds crazy. But I think that groups like ours and so many makerspaces, so the idea is we're trying to get people re-empowered technologically, to try to break the barrier between technologies and them, and which is why we kind of like try to as big a net as possible, everything from, let's say, crocheting to coding to 3D printing. And I think that kind of culture changes the way people think about sustainability and repairability. And I think that it starts to make them rethink the way they view their own stuff. And they start to evaluate on like, okay, that's nice, but what if I need to fix it?
And tell me the story about Wayne and Forever Gaming as it fits with this conversation.
Well, it's exactly that. They have this basically huge arcade of all of these game consoles, everything from stuff from the 80s to the PS5, right? And Wayne has to constantly repair these devices. And now these devices are no longer in production. You know, the PS2 actually had like the longest run. And so he said that his business wouldn't be sustainable if he couldn't repair them himself. So, you know, the cost of sending these out to be repaired would be prohibitive in the fact that he has to do that cost. And, you know, he has to maintain them. So it shows the importance of, and these are things that are culturally important. Like, you know, these games are part of our common literature now. And they run on machines. So if the machines aren't there, it's lost, right? If you can't emulate it, it's lost. So it proves an importance to like sustainability and the ability to repair. And I think that was like, you know, very insightful when I heard that.
Pierre, thanks for taking time to come on the program. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you very much. It was a lot of fun.
All right, buddy. Pierre Garrig there, DIY Society of Western Newfoundland, making some great points there. Bring it back to my guests here in the studio for Josh or Audrey. Thoughts on what you're hearing?
Yeah, I just want to touch on the point that Josh had made previously, right? So at the tool library, in addition to having tons of tools, we also have things like lawnmowers and string trimmers, right? Things that for 7 to 9 months of the year would just sit idle in your shed or your garage. And so rather than purchasing one for $300 to $500, you can have a membership to the tool library and you can just check it out when you need it. And then it's the tool library's responsibility to fix and maintain that equipment rather than you as a homeowner. And so there's a large number of things like that where really having kind of a communal idea about goods and services that we don't necessarily need ourselves or need to have all the time, and having a place where you can go and just borrow those, and you then don't have to worry about the maintenance of that item yourself. Obviously, it doesn't work for things like refrigerators, but there's probably a large number of things if you were to go through your household that you don't use frequently or more than once a month.
Oh, if it's gas operated, I kind of don't want to be bothered with it, to be honest, right? Because so like thinking about a lawnmower and this, you need the gas can and whatever else goes with it, and it's just like it. So that like in my mind, if someone else has one that I can just use and then to bring back, far easier for Adam Walsh's life, I guess.
And just to jump in there, I mean, just to take that example, the hypothetical maybe of you and Audra each have a lawnmower. If only one of you does, you've cut your environmental footprint in half. Yeah. Right? 50% cut. I mean, so the kinds of things that you're talking about there are really, you know, we don't necessarily think about them as you know, energy and material conservation, pollution reduction, all of that kind of stuff. But again, as Audrey's pointing out, you know, that lawnmower or whatever that's sitting in your garage or your shed for 6 months or longer, even when we want to use them, say in the summer, we don't all use them at the same time. So really we're talking about a distribution problem as opposed to, or, you know, an access problem rather than, you know, I don't have one. And when we can find ways, organized ways to share those things that we already have, we're automatically doing environmental conservation in a lot of really important ways that are, they may not be splashy, but they're effective.
We've got Professor Natasha Tusakov on the line now, professor at York University. How are you doing, Professor Tusakov?
I'm well. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on the program. You've written extensively on the right to repair. I was just wondering if you'd give us an overview of just kind of where Canada stacks up with what we're trying to do with the right to repair movement right now to other places, other jurisdictions.
Sure. Canada is currently behind the United States and the European Union. So a number of American states, including California, have passed right to repair laws. And a lot of other states either are considering them or have carried them over to the next kind of consideration. And the European Union has just introduced a directive for the right to repair, which means all member states of the EU have 24 months to implement a right to repair at the national level. So we've got lots of precedents that we can look to, various American states, the European Union, but we're currently lagging behind those two jurisdictions.
And when we lag behind, what does that mean for Canadians across the country and waste and the environment?
Well, it means that Canadians across the country have to largely take any kind of software-embedded goods from, their fridge or their cell phone or their vehicle or their fitness device. They have to take them often to an authorized repairer. So this is John Deere or your vehicle's dealership to get repaired. It means that spare parts can be more expensive or impossible to get, and often it means that people have to throw away devices that they'd rather keep that still are working properly, except for the small problem they have. So it's a lot of waste, and it's more expensive for consumers.
What do you think people may not understand about where waste ends up?
I think people understand, and I think in a misinformed way, that because companies have been deliberately deceptive, that they are good at recycling, that, Apple or Samsung will take your device when you upgrade it and will refurbish that, maybe sell that back to someone else in the community or extract all the precious earth minerals from it and recycle it in a kind of a comprehensive and sustainable way. And that's not true at all, that many of our devices end up as e-waste, often in developing countries, and they're just dumped there. They contaminate the soil, they contaminate water, and it's very poor people in very dangerous conditions kind of dismantle these products and bear the brunt of the environmental damage.
That is, I mean, and I knew this prep before the show, but just hearing it from you, when you think about it, I think in places where you pay fees sometimes to recycle these things, and then the reality being what you just laid out, it's quite the difference in the pictures that are painted.
Absolutely, and some of these devices still have use in them. They're still viable products, but for whatever reason, people might want to upgrade to the next version, or they might want to buy a refurbished product. But for a company, say, like Apple, that is always encouraging us to upgrade, Apple's revenue model doesn't want people to buy refurbished, reused products. They want us to buy new. So they deliberately make it very difficult to find those used products. For example, Apple's got a deal with Amazon, which means that there's more new products for sale on Amazon that are Apple products. But the converse of that means that Amazon can't sell refurbished Apple products on their platform. It's a way to kind of cut down the reuse factor.
So this is, as we see, and we're having this conversation here in studio too. This is, like you mentioned, this is where legislation is so important. If you can force companies to act in a certain way, because they tend not to do it on their own without being forced to do it.
Absolutely. And so what people are talking about is not major. It's about making the spare parts, the diagnostic tools, the manuals, the diagnostic software commercially available at reasonable prices. So this would mean that if you're a keen fixer on your own, you could purchase some of these manuals and spare parts, but also it means that the independent repair shops in our local communities, where we'd rather have our dollars spent, they would be able to easily repair many of these devices.
Professor Natasha Tusakov, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you.
All right, you are listening to The Signal. We are talking about the right to repair. I'm Adam Walsh. Here with me in the studio, we've got two great guests talking all about the right to repair here today. Josh Leposki is Associate Professor at the Department of Geography at Memorial University. Audrey Parnell, Board Member at the Tool Library and Manager of Circular Economy at EcoNext. Sounded very similar to what we're talking about for, the conversation we had with the good professor from York University there. Any like Josh, you've written a lot about this. Do you want to expand a bit more on it?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot that of different directions that we can take this. I mean, part of it is thinking, about. I think it's important to think about the limits of consumer choice. So, I mean, Apple is easy to pick on. I have plenty of Apple devices, but they're a giant company, so I'm sure they can take the criticism. So to pick on them, they are working hard to monopolize in many ways their, if you want to use these terms, their device ecosystems, right? So that once you start by purchasing an Apple device, maybe an iPhone, you are given the barriers to using their ecosystem are deliberately made low, and the barriers to using a different system are deliberately made high. That's very abstract, but so concrete examples like you're automatically prompted to, would you like to use iCloud to back up your, so you go, of course, you're just getting rid of those menu screens and you're pressing the buttons,
so convenient,
right? It's so convenient. But once you're in that ecosystem, to switch away from iCloud to something else.
Can't even imagine.
Right. And so that means, that's just one of the ways, it's one of the hooks, if you will, right, to lock you into a particular device ecosystem. Once they have you in certain ways, then they can do things like pushing new operating systems, software upgrades that even if you don't want the new ones, especially if it's an operating system upgrade, you may not have the choice. And if the device you have can handle that upgrade, very soon you get into that situation where you're no longer able to upgrade, and then you start getting menus like, this is no longer secure, we're not supporting anymore, and you're pushed to purchase a new device. So I think it's really important to think carefully about the idea of consumer choice here, especially as, again, that one has the ability to shop your way to a better world, right? If you go into a retailer and you're looking for a new phone, you're confronted with a large number of different makes and models. And so there's an appearance of choice. But underneath all of that, the underlying, engineering, material and energy consequences, the labor conditions, they are so similar that the idea that there is a meaningful choice there for you is really a meaningless kind of approach to things. So yeah, I would say, if you're looking for the most environmental device, it's the one you already have.
Yeah.
Well, and what's challenging as well, I've spent some time working with computers for schools here in the province. And so they very kindly take donated laptops and computers and they wipe them and they refurbish them and they give them to schools or not-for-profits or low-income individuals that need computers. And as we live in the 21st century, pretty much everything we do requires the use of a computer. And they're really worried about this big Microsoft 11 software update that's coming, because then all of these devices will no longer have access to support and through security. And so all of these computers they've put in the community, they're then going to have to replace them. And so they spent a lot of time trying to make sure that we've properly recycled computers. We're extending the lifespan of something, and it's something as simple as a software update. All of these computers will be obsolete, and they're going to have to kind of start from scratch, building inventories and resupplying people who need computers, because people in this age of digital information and digital technology, having security when you're purchasing things online is paramount. And so they have that recognition that they can't give people computers that aren't safe and secure. But there's then this whole problem of more computers.
Yeah. I mean, that's it's a great example. It's a sort of classic example of that, sort of software push, that infrastructural push where choice is not really the relevant issue there. I mean, there can be some ways around it. I'd be interested if Audrey, if Computers for School is thinking about it. But and we heard it on the call a little bit, the free and open software kind of stuff. I've been running a little personal experiment that I've called The Last Computer. I happen to have an old laptop lying around, and I just was thinking to myself, like, what if this was the last computer I could ever have use? I couldn't buy a new one. And that meant things like putting a Linux software on it. And I am not especially techie. I mean, it took me the better part of half a day to get it on, but it works great. And I use LibreOffice, which is essentially a full suite of Microsoft-like software. And for me, my principal job is data analysis, writing, research, that kind of stuff. So I'm not a video editor, so I don't need a super high powered machine. That computer, I think, was originally purchased in 2012. So it's still kicking along. So yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of that, we got an email in. Hey, gang, love the show topic. Well, thank you. I haven't bought a new computer in 10 years, usually buy used and upgrade. Companies can make fixing and upgrading easier, but would rather you use their repair services at a premium. Parts are even locked out so they can't properly work in phones/tablets. Government internet intervention is needed to mandate companies to make repair and upgradability easier for everyone, not just geeks like me. Well, thank you for that email. And if anyone else listening, if you've got emails for the show, thoughts on what you're hearing, the signal at cbc.ca, the signal line 709-576-5260. Let's go back to the phones. We've got Justin Penny on the line, owner and operator of iDoctor NL. Justin, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. What are your thoughts on right to repair? As someone who does what you do, I'm fairly certain that you're very much in favor of it and it expanding.
Oh, very much so. I'm very in favor of it. I mean, over the past 14 years, I've gone through thousands of phones that would have ended up in the landfill otherwise. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous that companies are restricting the ability to fix these products. They're completely fixable.
Tell folks more about what you do with iDoctor.
So I do cell phone and tablet repair all day long. It's all I've ever done for the past 14 years. And it's all about being honest to the customer and just giving them a way to fix their device, the devices that they need in their life for a lower cost, a lower price.
So when you think about it, what's the impact that this has environmentally or financially for folks?
I mean, the financial difference is immense. I can fix something for like 1/10 of the cost of those companies offer. It's absolutely ridiculous what they're going to charge us nowadays.
And on the climate side of it, for climate change, I mean, I'm just thinking, like Josh Lepofsky here just said, we were talking earlier in the show about like the device you own. I mean, what was it, Josh? Like, I'm gonna muck it up. So if you could repeat it,
the most environmental device is the one you already have.
There
if
you
you
go.
need a bumper sticker, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that, Justin?
I mean, how many cell phones have you owned in your lifetime? I've owned maybe 7 or 8.
Yeah.
When realistically, I could still use the iPhone 4S that I first bought 10, 12 years ago. If there wasn't such a thing as intentional obsolescence, where the software is intentionally slowed down over the years, so you have to buy a new device. I mean, it's corporate greed. It's really ridiculous in this day and age.
Yeah, so corporate greed. What else do you think about this world that we live in where there's so much when it comes to electronics, devices that we buy just end up being thrown out a year, 2, 3 years later just to be bought again, especially, again, with this point in time with climate change and everything else going on?
Yeah, you're basically buying the same technology. Don't get me wrong, the technology is absolutely wonderful. It's linked us across the world, but there really hasn't been any new innovations in the past 12 years. So you're really just buying a shiny new version of that device. And it's not necessary.
Justin Penny, I want to say thank you for your time.
Well, thank you for having me on.
All right, buddy. Justin Penny, their owner and operator of iDoctor NL, talking about all the repairs he's doing. But that's nothing compared to everything else that's out there, and the fact that certain things can't be repaired right now. What do you guys think?
Well, yeah, I think Justin touches on a key point, which is having access to people, right? So he provides a service whereby he can repair certain types of technologies. And there's other places we can go, like the tool library, we can repair certain types of technologies, but certainly having greater amounts of people who have skills and knowledge about how do we fix these things, whether it's as we move towards the future, right, where we've got more heat pumps, everything in our house, as we move towards electrification, having electric vehicles, being able to access those mechanics and services, not just at a dealership, but at your local repair shop is going to be critical as we move more and more towards this age of electrical, digital transformation.
I was just going to add that, that access question is that Audrey's bringing up is crucial. I mean, an important way to think about this is increasing competition, right? What companies like Apple and other big ones are doing are increasingly monopolizing, right? Which is ostensibly the opposite of what our economic system is all about, right? So when you have more competition around repair, then the prices for it decline. But that's not going to happen by itself. There does need to be regulatory intervention. In part, I hate to keep harping on this, but because of these intellectual property issues, which are quite different than what sort of drove things in the past, say around, it was until very recently, very normal for people who have a car to do repairs themselves, in part because there's a huge ecosystem of companies other than the brand manufacturer that you can buy parts, components, whatever, that are compatible with your particular car. But as cars have become more and more digital, that has increasingly gone away, and this is what we see kind of across the board, is that seeping in of intellectual property through the chips in things that have offered companies a way to start monopolizing again in a way that in previous periods government regulation broke up.
And more folks are into like the smart home thing. It's like, hey, I can control the whatever in my refrigerator because there's a chip in it, and I can make sure that the water is 12 degrees because I want it to be.
And that's a great example of, like, people should get mad about this because as people adopt those home automation things, and because they're software driven and it's IP law that is so important to that, you get companies. This actually happens. I won't name the company, but they sold something like 4 million home automation packages, devices, what have you. And after they sold them, said to their customers, okay, you bought this, but now we're a subscription service. And we're a subscription service because we don't sell your data and we don't send you advertising. So we need a different revenue model. And by the way, if you don't subscribe monthly, as of this date, you will no longer be able to access your software. So they are bricking, as the term is used. They're bricking your house.
I read something about the idea being floated for car manufacturers to have the subscription service for certain things in cars, like seat warmers.
Yep.
Which is like, what?
Yes. Yeah, well, again, at the risk of harping on it, this is one of the sort of, whether it's intended or not doesn't really matter. It's the effect. And the intellectual property law has provided a way in for, brand manufacturers to, parcel up what in the past was like one thing, a car. Now it's, well, do you want a subscription for the heated seats and the stereo? What about those fog lamps? And it becomes a way to expand the market, but monopolize it.
Pay for the airbags.
That's right. That's right. Just before impact, insert coin.
Quick. Add another loony or toonie to the car because, whoops. Audrey, what have you learned about waste in Newfoundland and Labrador? Like, just give me a picture of some of the learning that you've done of waste.
Sure, yeah. So I was compiling a little while ago some data from Stats Canada, and while as Newfoundland and Labrador, because we don't have a huge population, the volume of waste we make is actually pretty low relative to all the other provinces in Canada. That being said, if you take the volume of waste divided by our population, we're then the third most trashy province.
Wow.
Per person.
Yeah, so like the volume, like you said, we don't have millions of people, so there's less trash because we don't have, like the population is what, 540,000 and
Yep.
change, right? However, the bang for your buck of a person producing garbage, we're packing a pretty hard punch.
It is, and waste management's very challenging across the province, right? Like there's just been a lot of news about like what's happened on Bell Island with the landfills there, and people with waste management there, and then to bring it kind of back towards what we've been talking about with like right to repair. I feel very fortunate we live in St. John's, right? We're here reporting from lovely MUN campus on St. John's. But if you live outside in rural Newfoundland, it can be incredibly hard to have access to anyone who can repair devices for you, fix things, access parts. It can be months and months for you to get access to those resources. And so you really don't necessarily have a ton of choice when it comes to fixing a product, especially one that would require specialized knowledge to repair. And so that just contributes to items making their way to the landfill.
Also, and this is off topic kind of, but still connected, just a quick word on methane too while we're having it.
Oh, yeah, sure. So most other Atlantic provinces have implemented some amount of like methane capture at their particular landfill. And this is great because it reduces the amount of methane that makes its way into the atmosphere. But then it also provides pretty much free power to households or to power plants and things like that. And we currently do not have this here in Newfoundland and Labrador at any of our particular landfills. And so we're currently the highest amount of methane emitting from landfills in all of Atlantic Canada. So even though we are one of the lowest populated provinces, we have the highest amount of methane landfill emissions. And the amount of emissions that come from our landfills, it's kind of our third major source of emissions here in the province would be from waste.
And something that's highly manageable.
Yes, and something as we are making our way towards net zero as 2050, this is a very low-hanging opportunity that we could quickly say. There's solutions that exist elsewhere. The problem, again, is just for the amount of money it would cost and the amount of waste we make in Newfoundland, because we don't have heaps and heaps and volumes of waste. It's not necessarily the most economically attractive way of dealing with this methane problem.
All right. The life cycle of something, right? Like, hold on, I like doing sound effects on this show. So this is my iPhone here, right? What should people know about how much waste is generated from like start to finish with this thing?
Sure.
Or other things, or the lawnmower example from earlier, or this metal cup that I have here in my hand.
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in to say that, in almost any case you want to look at, the vast majority of pollution and waste has occurred before you purchase your device.
Yeah.
Which, by definition, that means that no amount of post-consumer recycling is going to recoup what was already released before you purchased it. That is not an argument against recycling. It is an argument against recycling as a solution to a total life cycle pollution waste problem. Post-consumer recycling can do a lot of good things, like diverting material from landfills, for example, and routing it back into manufacturing systems. But it is just by definition, it cannot recoup. When 80% or more of the waste and pollution happened before you purchased a given device, no amount of post-consumer recycling is going to recapture that 80%.
Yeah, and it makes me think of cars too, right? Like everyone talks about buying, like switching to electric, but it's like, hold on now. Like, and yes, fine, of course, right? Trying to have electric vehicles and change the grid and all of that stuff, trying to decarbonize. However, if you're buying something new, there's a big footprint on each and every one of these that does stack up still. Yeah.
I mean, mining is by far the largest contributor certainly in terms of mass. And I only use that metric because that's the way waste is. If it's not gas, it's usually measured in terms of kilograms or tons. So, yeah.
I think it's the bit with me with all this. It could, reduce, reuse, recycle. And so much of, like, as a child, a teenager of the 1990s, the third R word there, recycle. Like I grew up thinking, you look at a plastic thing and you got the little triangle. And it's like, oh, look at me doing a good job. But like you said, it's not to say don't recycle, but it's just to have a clearer picture around what it all means, where things go, and what we're actually doing when we're doing things.
Well, I think a lot of other provinces, especially when we think about like BC, right, is kind of it's a gold star in green economy type things. Like they have tons of circularity built into their economy, and they really incentivize circular economy in a way that's just kind of beginning here in Newfoundland and Labrador. But certainly you can go to a place like the Natural Vibe, and they have refilling stations, right? So you only have to ever buy a shampoo and conditioner bottle once.
Yes.
And then you can go there and you can refill it to your heart's content as many times over. And you're taking that single-use item out of needing to be purchased over and over again, and you're kind of reducing the amount of waste you're producing. So it's moving away from just the recycle R, but more into the reuse R of the triangle and the reduce.
Yeah, because those are the more, I don't want to say more important, but we should the words we should be focusing much more on those first two ones. Right?
It's called a waste hierarchy for a reason, for sure.
Well, there's a term on it and everything. Hold on.
But just to pick up on what Audrey is saying, infrastructure is so crucial here, and it is also important to understand that recycling was initially very strongly resisted by industry. But we're talking, sort of mid to late 60s.
Yeah, we're talking like The Graduate, where it's like Dustin Hoffman going to a career in plastics.
Exactly. But after initial very substantial resistance to the passage of legislation around what get called bottle bills, the take back system for bottles that we have, there was a realization in industry that rather than convincing people to buy something and put it in their hand or in their home, we can create an infrastructure that moves things through their hands and through their homes, and that's disposability. So recycling actually bolsters that. So instead of it being something that industry hated, it became something industry loves because it could be framed as you just pointed out, look at me doing the right thing, doing the good thing. We all want that, sort of that personal, what can I do to make things better? But that results from training. I mean, and I mean that in a very real sense. Like, I have a relatively young son. I remember so early on, I think it was grade 2 or 3 when the recycling lesson started. And that was a very visceral, for someone who studies discard and wasting, it was like, oh, the propaganda starts very early.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in the 90s, we didn't have you couldn't get hearts and likes on stuff. So the recycling feeling was all folks had for that burst, right? To feel good about themselves. Audrey, any final, as we wind down the show with maybe a minute and a half left, any final thoughts from you?
No, I just want to, again, put a plug out there for the Tool Library and say we're on Bonaventure across from Brother Rice. We're a volunteer-run organization, and we'd love to help you fix something that you need, or if you need help finding a tool or you need help figuring out how to do a DIY project, we'd love to see you. Come on by.
Excellent. Josh, final word with 30 seconds left.
I mean, I'll just bolster another shout out for not just the Tool Library, but tool libraries. Let's get more of them out there. It's infrastructure that we need to, repair and keep using the devices that we already have. And there's huge opportunities for that in this province.
Yeah, and I'll plug that as well. Like, we have more tools than we need at the Tool Library, and we certainly take donations all the time. But if you're outside St. John's and you're interested in starting up a tool library, reach out to us. We'd be more than happy to get you started with the technology we use and with some tools as your basis.
Thanks, folks. Appreciate the chat.
Thank you. This was a lot of fun.
All right, that is the end of today's show. So thank you to Josh Leposki there and Audrey Parnell. Let me see, what day is it? Today's Monday, which means tomorrow's Tuesday, last I checked, which means It's gardening day. What are you growing this season? How are things looking early-ish on? If you've got questions about, like, we want updates, right? I just like to hear what you're growing, how that's doing. And if you have questions, I mean, I know I have questions. I'm getting more and more into gardening the longer that I do this show, so I'm going to have some of my own. I want yours too. Tomorrow with horticulturist Megan McCarthy from Memorial University's Botanical Garden. Until tomorrow, thank you so much for listening.